Yuji's trial by fire was absolutely gripping, watching him choose between his budding feelings and tribal loyalty, only to be blindsided by the real test. Taking command of the secret Jinwu Guard was intense. The reveal of its true function as an intelligence agency, monitoring even their own officials and running orphans into spies. Chilling, but utterly fascinating world building. It brilliantly contrasts with the relentless progress. Massive new ships taking shape, military formations being reformed on the fly. Love the nod to historical tactics. And plans laid for multiple new cities. The chief's calculated ruthlessness, balanced by moments like rejecting human sacrifice for the Yujiang integration, makes him such a compelling figure. Even his personal conflict over attending his wife's childbirth versus leading the crucial winter campaign adds depth. Now, with this meticulously planned winter strike against the unsuspecting tribe, leveraging surprise and new formations aimed at capture, not killing, the execution feels terrifyingly imminent. After hearing your analysis of the advantages of a winter campaign, a chorus of sharp hisses, sucked breaths of understanding, filled the tent. Damn, so warfare involved this many twists and turns. The group of gruff soldiers looked at each other, eyes screaming, "Lesson learned." Already taking mental notes. Ying Rui and Shui Tu were right earlier. You cleared your throat and tapped the sand table. If we sail over there with such fanfare, by the time we slowly disembark, the opportunity will be long gone. The enemy will have already slipped away. What kind of encirclement would that be? So, my idea is, we quietly enter the village, no shooting. Bah, I mean we land ahead of schedule. Land ahead of schedule? A buzz immediately filled the tent. The general's brows furrowed into knots, their faces covered in question marks. You deliberately kept them guessing, arms crossed, wearing an expression that said, "Figure it out yourselves." Well, it was heuristic teaching. They needed to use their brains more. The generals crowded around the sand table, their eyes scanning, like searchlights. Duoduo, commander of the Qianniu Guard, had the quickest mind. He picked up the command baton, made a few strokes on the sand table, and had a sudden realization. The chief means we sail part of the way, then when we're still a day or two from the target, we secretly slip ashore. He grew more excited as he spoke. That way, we'll have plenty of time to disembark while the enemy is still completely in the dark. Then, we approach overland and wrap them up like dumplings before they even know what's happening. Snap. You snapped your fingers. Correct, 10 points. Exactly, that's the plan. Land 2 days early, let the brothers prone to seasickness catch their breath and recover their combat strength. Then the entire army advances lightly equipped, scouts fanning out front, back, left, and right, like ants exploring the path. If we encounter anyone on the road, no matter who, tie them up first. We absolutely cannot let word leak out. You paused, tapping a point on the sand table. However, that alone isn't safe enough. We could easily be spotted as we get close. So, we also need to pull a feint, draw all their attention elsewhere. Before anyone could ask, your words flowed like a river. After the main force lands, advance stealthily. You Fu, you take those 3 two-masted sailing ships and continue charging forward. When you reach the destination, make as much noise as possible. Wave flags, shout battle cries, beat the drums thunderously. Send landing craft out pretending to make a desperate beach assault. Remember, your mission is to put on a show. The more convincing, the better. Make them think we intend to force a confrontation on the water, seeking revenge for last time. Glue their eyes to the river surface, providing cover for our land forces. Once our encirclement closes on land, we'll use our superior numbers to push them towards the riverbank. You Fu, that's when you stop acting. Lead everyone in. A real charge. Simultaneously, bring all our large troop transport ships over, covering the river surface. The display of power must be overwhelming. We need to scare them half to death. And if they still refuse to surrender, a grin spread across your face. Then stop wasting words and hit them hard. We have 10 times their numbers and overwhelming equipment superiority. If we can't win even with this, gentlemen,
Might as well go home and raise kids instead of embarrassing yourselves as officers here. You finished explaining the plan in one breath. The tent instantly erupted in cheers. The generals were all rubbing their hands together, eager to start.
Feeling the plan was practically flawless. If they couldn't win with this, they really could just pack their bags and go home.
The chief is brilliant. This plan is fantastic. We Qianniu Guard guarantee mission completion. Duoduo was the first to pledge, his face flushed with excitement. Same for us, Huben Guard, Shui stated concisely, nodding firmly. Seeing
the overflowing confidence of your two top generals, you nodded in satisfaction, then slammed your hand on the table and stood up abruptly, radiating authority. Orders! Shh, clank. All the officers in the tent instantly shot to their feet, the rustling scrape of their armor perfectly synchronized, filling the air with a grim martial aura. Qianniu Guard, Huben Guard, hear your orders. The entire army will assemble immediately. Pack all gear and depart at once. Route is as follows. Qianniu Guard leads the way, Huben Guard in the center, scouts spread out on both flanks. You must reach the encampment outside Fuma Pass by dusk today. Tomorrow, Matian County. The day after, Danshan County. Then Hanyang City, Ruyang Commandery, Sitong County. Maintain a forced march pace. Objective. Weishan Commandery docks outside Liuyang Commandery. Reach Weishan Commandery docks within 13 days, then encamp there for 10 days. Logistics Department is responsible for preparing half a month's worth of dry rations. All other troops, drill embarking and disembarking like madmen, get
familiar with life aboard ship. 10 days later, we officially board the ships and launch the expedition. Acknowledged. The thunderous reply shook the command tent. Just then, Shui scratched his head, asking with a simple and honest look, Chief, why take such a big detour? Wouldn't going directly to Weishan Commandery be faster? Isn't this just wasting time? You chuckled, holding up 3 fingers. This kills 3 birds with 1 stone. First, it's a training march for the troops, prevents them from dropping the ball when it matters. We haven't had a proper long-distance field exercise. Second, it lets everyone stop by home on the way, say hello to their wives and children. Let them see how impressive we look and put their minds at ease. Third, mainly the ships aren't quite ready yet. Even if we flew there, we'd just be waiting idly. Better to take a stroll first, and while we're at it, show some muscle to the populace along the route, reassure them. So that was the reason. Everyone voiced their understanding, and quickly scurried back to their respective units, starting to shout at the soldiers to pack their bags. Striking camp wasn't like demolishing a house. It was mainly about organizing supplies and equipment. This military camp was well-equipped and vast. You intended to keep it to settle people from the Yujiang clan later. Supplies and military rations were loaded onto large wagons. Soldiers wrapped their spare clothes in their bedding rolls, fashioning them into backpacks worn on their backs. The livestock kept in the camp were driven out. The larger animals pulled carts or carried goods, while the leftover pigs and sheep were slaughtered directly, made into frozen meat to be gnawed on during the journey. An hour later, war drums thundered and horns blared long notes. Over 4,000 soldiers, helmets bright and armor shining, stood assembled in formation, spirits high. The continuous rustling of armor plates merged into a single sound. Countless banners snapped and fluttered in the harsh north wind. Once, the ranks were formed. Absolute silence fell over the field. Several thousand soldiers stood like statues, utterly still. Battle robes like fire, iron armor like snow, spears and halberds like a forest, great shields like a wall. A sky full of unfurling red flags merged into a crimson ocean. This force was enough to crush anything in its path. They were the Han tribe's Iron Fist, the Empire's vanguard, the Red Army. March. You wasted no extra words, just uttered the command, sharp and decisive. The red ocean instantly surged into motion. Qianniu Guard cavalry spurred out of the camp first, advancing like swift arrows to clear the path. Immediately after, scout teams scattered like beans, disappearing into the open country. The main army began to move out with orderly steps, while the Huben Guard scouts also quickly fanned out to the flanks, guarding the surroundings.
Finally, Huben Guard cavalry flanked the main army, ready to disperse any unlucky enemies who stumbled upon them. With this marching formation, in this era, as long as the commander didn't make foolish mistakes, it would be hard even to lose. Scouts were deployed far enough ahead to provide early warning. Unless the enemy could fly, they couldn't dream of launching a sneak attack. You followed along with the main force. Whenever you camped outside a city, you would personally ascend the city walls and, together with the city's inhabitants, review the troops, display military might, and boost morale. This was especially aimed at the newly joined tribes, partly as a disciplinary warning, telling them not to try any funny business, and partly to show them the Han tribe's powerful backing, allowing them to live in peace. This combination of actions had an outstanding effect. The common folk saw their own menfolk and boys serving in the army, looking majestic and awe-inspiring, standing ramrod straight, and their sense of pride exploded. Having such an iron army in the family was a real source of honor. The new equipment dazzled the eyes of the young men, who clamored to know when recruitment would happen again, and whether they were qualified. Unfortunately, the answer was no. The Han tribe couldn't afford more full-time soldiers yet. The cost was too high. To be a soldier? Wait until the veterans honorably retire. The army marched eastward. On the night you camped outside Hanyang City, you specifically slipped home for a night's sleep, held your 2 wives, and promised, patting your chest, that you'd be back right after seeing these lads off on the ships, absolutely not missing the births of their children. Upon reaching Luoyang Commandery, you took some time to visit the shipyard. The last tower ship was being painted, glossy and bright. The person in charge patted his chest, assuring you it would absolutely be finished within 10 days and wouldn't delay the crucial expedition. You nodded with satisfaction, and the next day led the army northward towards Weishan Commandery.
The troops would encamp at the docks by the Great Lake for 10 days, the main task being hellish embarking and disembarking training. They needed to familiarize themselves with the environment beforehand, get used to the swaying, to avoid the embarrassing spectacle of a whole shipload of men vomiting profusely when they actually reached the battlefield. The 3 existing tower ships became training vessels. Each had a standard capacity of 800 men. Subtracting the crew, you decreed that 700 soldiers be crammed aboard each, with the remaining space for supplies or for the unlucky ones prone to seasickness. These 3 new ships alone could transport the main force of a Weisuo military garrison unit. That was some serious transport capacity. The soldiers boarding the ships for the first time were like wide-eyed provincials seeing wonders for the first time, clicking their tongues in amazement at these waterborne behemoths, touching this and looking at that, bursting with curiosity. You didn't stop them, letting them look around freely. Familiarity reduces fear. As for the soldiers not assigned to the large ships, they weren't as comfortable. They had to squeeze onto the older 2-masted sailing ships for training. The ships were smaller, but there were plenty of them. Over 20, more than enough even if you stuffed 100 men onto each. The soldiers began their intense training, embarking and disembarking daily, running until they vomited, then falling
into formation, then back onto the ships, repeating the cycle endlessly. It wore out the group of tough landlubbers considerably, and every one of them felt immense pressure. Fortunately, just 1 day before the army was scheduled to depart, the tower ship that had just completed its outfitting, still smelling of fresh paint, finally came riding the wind and waves, mooring majestically alongside the pier.
Seeing another mobile fortress capable of carrying 700 men join the fleet, you were inwardly overjoyed, feeling even more confident. Watching the dozens of large ships sail away in a single line, riding the wind and breaking the waves, you stood rooted to the pier for the longest time, like a statue carved from waiting.
Only when goose-feather snowflakes started falling thick and fast, blanketing your shoulders in white, did you shiver and turn back towards the official residence in Weishan Commandery. Once the snow stopped completely, you began the slow journey, Home. The roads were slippery after the snow, and you walked at a snail's pace. When you finally ambled up to your doorstep the next day, good heavens, Xiao Dai and Zhan Ying's bellies were both bulging as if they were each carrying a watermelon, looking about ready to give birth any moment. Your mother-in-law, Shang, had already moved in to take charge, squeezing onto the bed with the two expectant mothers. You, meanwhile, were miserably relegated to sleeping on a floor pallet in the study across the hall, handling official business while keeping an ear cocked for any sounds, your heart a mix of anticipation and slight panic, adding both lifetimes. Together, this was your very first time becoming a father. The thought was actually a little thrilling. You had barely settled in at home for 2 days when, on the 3rd day, a majestic falcon swooped down with fluttering wings, carrying a flying falcon dispatch from Yu Fu. The message reported that the new 3-masted sailing ships were practically supercars on water, much faster than the old 2-masted ones. The fleet had smooth sailing all the way. Combined with having scouted the route before, they knew it well. The sailors worked in 3 shifts, traveling day and night without stopping at shore. In just 1 day and night, they had sped to the EAE newly established Dongxin commandery near the coal mine, then raced for another 3 days to reach the sandbar, the place where you had found the Li tribe. Now the main force was charging towards the predetermined landing point. The northwest. Wind in winter was wickedly cold but also helpful. The fleet had a tailwind, sails fully hoisted, making excellent speed. They estimated reaching the location to land secretly in about 4 more days. You quickly sent a reply. Just a few words. Stay safe, smooth sailing, beat the enemy quickly and come home. Report again before landing. The smooth progress of the Daesh fleet eased your mind somewhat. But the atmosphere at home was palpably tense. Xiao Di and Zhan Ying began complaining of abdominal pain in turns, sucking in breaths sharply. Based on your rudimentary modern medical knowledge, you guessed their pelvises were starting to open up. Both had officially entered the final countdown to labor. They couldn't go anywhere, confined to bed, waiting. There was no rest for you either. You quickly arranged for them to be settled separately, one in the main bedroom, the other on the warmly heated Kang, brick bed, in your study. Why separate them? What if they didn't go into labor simultaneously? If one was screaming in agony, the other might get too scared to give birth. Even if they started together, one room might not be spacious enough, leading to chaos. You directed several women to frantically boil water, ensuring a constant supply. You pulled out numerous old linen cloths, washed white from use, and tossed them into pots of boiling water to sterilize them for later. Soft silk swaddling clothes were also prepared for the babies. Next, you had fragrant chicken noodle soup, stewed, personally carrying bowls and feeding it to both women mouthful by mouthful to replenish their strength. Then, you began pacing back and forth between the 2 rooms like a cat on a hot tin roof, comforting one for a moment, encouraging the other the next. Perhaps influenced by your mother-in-law Shang, Xiao Die and Zhan Ying insisted on following old traditions, making you adorn them with all the prettiest, most treasured jewelry they owned. Though you grumbled internally about vanity at a time like this, you didn't refuse. Pearls gifted by the Niue tribe, shimmering seashells, gold and silver jewelry produced locally, even translucent bracelets polished from antelope horn, plus a few Chinese knot bracelets you had braided in your spare time. You dug everything out. The small gifts you'd given over time had accumulated into quite a pile. You helped Xiao Di fasten a gleaming silver bracelet onto her wrist. She grasped your hand. Husband, do you remember the character Ying you taught me? You nodded, pressing her hand to your cheek, your voice a little tight. I remember. You forgot. Xiao Di looked at you, her eyes surprisingly bright. You once told me that for a woman, giving birth is like walking through the gates of hell, a brush with death. That's why, before it happens, she should wear her most treasured jewelry, make herself beautiful to face the ordeal. Around here, far from the sea, shells are the most precious treasures. You explained how the character for baby, Ying, is made. The character for woman below, topped with 2 symbols for shell or treasure.
So the child born is our treasure, our baobei. She took a deep breath. Now, I've put on all the treasures you gave me. I'm not afraid anymore. Husband, do I look beautiful? Your eyes stung. You nodded hard, your voice hoarse. Beautiful. My Xiao Dai looks beautiful in anything. You'll be fine, absolutely fine. Trust me, I'm the chief of the Han tribe. When have my words ever been wrong? Xiao Dai, you must be strong. I forbid you to die. You have to live well for me. This is an order. No one can defy it, not even King Yama. Without my permission, no. One can take you away. Do you hear me? You must live. Seeing how incredibly tense you were, a faint smile touched Xiao Di's lips, carrying a hint of happiness. Though a contraction creased her brow, she still managed generously. Husband, you should go check on Sister Yinger. You haven't been over there for a while. She keeps things bottled up. If you don't go, she'll surely be more frightened. You nodded gently, kissed her forehead, and turned to the study across the hall. Seeing you enter, Zhan Ying, on the study's heated Kang, immediately reacted like a startled kitten, reaching out both arms. You quickly went over, bringing your face close, letting her wrap her arms around your neck. Husband. I'm here. You softened your voice to a whisper beside her ear. Yinger, don't be afraid. Husband is here. You'll definitely be all right. I'm not afraid. Zhan Ying's voice trembled slightly but was unusually firm. Husband is my savior. That time when they chose me to be some saintess, wanting to throw me in the river to feed the fish. I was terrified then. The icy river. Water chilled me so badly I cramped up. Couldn't climb ashore no matter how I tried. She buried her face in the crook of your neck. They just watched me get swept away farther and farther, my body getting colder and colder. I thought I was done for. It was you, husband, who pulled me onto the boat, even gave me your clothes. To wear. From that moment I knew you were sent by heaven to save me. As long as husband is by my side, Yinger isn't afraid of anything. Don't worry. You kissed her cheek. You'll be fine. My women are the best, blessed with great fortune, and destined to live long lives. Heaven will surely protect both you and the baby. Zhan Ying didn't speak again, merely tightening her arms around your neck, greedily drawing in the warmth and reassurance. But this tender moment didn't last long. Suddenly, the midwife's urgent shout came from across the hall. Chief, the First Lady's water broke. The words had barely faded when Xiao Di's heart-wrenching cry of pain followed. Ah, your heart clenched violently. You whipped your head around, staring at the door opposite. It was already the depths of winter, and as luck would have it, the last cold snap decided to flex its muscles. Snow had just fallen a few days prior, and the outside world was frozen like an ice cellar. But inside the small courtyard of your home, it was bustling with activity and filled with voices. Hired women hurried in and out, carrying steaming wooden buckets. The main bedroom inside had been temporarily converted into a delivery room. Xiao Dai lay miserably on the large bed, cold sweat soaking her hair. One hand gripped her mother Shang's hand tightly, while the other squeezed yours so hard it felt like the bones would break. She clenched her teeth, pushing with all her might. Push, my lady, harder, I see the head. Almost out. The midwife shouted encouragement from the side. Hearing this, you quickly stole a glance, silently thinking, head first, position is right. Thank goodness. Half the worry lifted from your heart. Your hand was already white from Xiao Di's grip, the joints nearly crushed. You could clearly feel the immense force she was using, but Xiao Dai still remembered your earlier encouragement. She was the chief's woman. She had to be strong. So she bit down hard, holding her breath and pushing downwards with concentrated effort. For some reason, though, the baby seemed stuck around the neck and just wouldn't come out. The midwife grew anxious. If this continued, the baby would surely suffocate. You noticed something was wrong too. Watching Xiao Dai holding her breath, her face flushed red, you suddenly slapped your forehead in realization. Xiao Dai! Don't clench your teeth. Shout. Shout. Shouting helps you push. Xiao Dai paused, half believing, half doubting. Under your encouraging gaze, she took another deep breath, but this time, instead of clenching her teeth,
She let out a mighty, "Ah!" shouting with all her strength. Hey, it actually worked. Following that great shout, the baby's shoulders slipped out smoothly. Though the pain almost made Xiaodai faint, once the shoulders were out, the rest went much more easily. Sure enough, after 2 more pushes, a wrinkled little thing finally announced its arrival into the world with a loud, "Wah!" The newborn baby seemed terrified upon leaving the womb, eyes shut tight, crying loudly. Then, when the umbilical cord was being cut, perhaps out of fright, a stream of pale yellow urine shot out from his little privates, scoring a direct hit on the 2 midwives nearby, drenching them. However, with mother and child safe, it was a joyous occasion, and no one bothered with such trifles, everyone beaming happily. In these times, adding new members to the tribe was a matter of utmost importance. "Chief, First Lady, the baby's born, it's born. It's a boy," the midwife announced. Joyfully. Let me see," Xiaodai panted, her voice weak but her face radiated unconcealable joy.
But when the 2 of you leaned closer for a look, you were both stunned. This baby, it was kind of ugly cute. His skin wasn't very fair, but he had a decent tuft of dark hair. The most outrageous thing was that this little guy was born with 2 tiny white teeth already in his mouth. And when he cried, his voice was incredibly loud, enough to shake the heavens. "Stop looking, stop looking," Shang quickly interrupted. "Take him to be washed first, put medicine on the cord, wrap it well with gauze, then you can look. Xiaodai, you're not done yet. The placenta hasn't come out. Push again." Oh, right. Right, the placenta. You slapped your head, cursing yourself for being so engrossed in the baby that you'd forgotten this part. Quick, keep pushing. The baby's fine. Fortunately, delivering the placenta went smoothly. Xiaodi's delivery had finally passed safely, despite the earlier scare. Several women deftly cleaned up the mess on the bed. The newborn little brat, having cried himself tired, looked much more pleasing to the eye after being washed. Medicine was carefully applied to his round little belly, which was then wrapped with several layers of clean old linen cloth, and finally, swaddled in the soft silk blankets prepared beforehand. Shang was wiping the sweat from Xiaodi's brow with a hot towel, naggingly imparting postpartum instructions. No bathing, no exposure to drafts, and she even shot you a glance, lowering her voice to warn Xiaodi that she couldn't do that with you for the time being. Exhausted, Xiaodai enjoyed her mother's care, gazing at her sleeping son in her arms. Suddenly, she remembered something and started discussing it with Shang. "Mother, didn't you say babies are born without teeth? Why does my son have 2? Shang was stumped too. After pondering for a long moment, she finally pointed the finger at you. Maybe the chief is different from ordinary people. Perhaps the chief was born with teeth." Watching this grandmother, mother, and yourself spouting nonsense with straight faces, you couldn't help but roll your eyes and explain speechlessly, "This just shows that life in our Han tribe is good. Xiaodai had excellent nutrition during her pregnancy, and I stewed bone broth for her every day for calcium. The child has a strong constitution, so being born with teeth is perfectly normal." Xiaodai blinked, half convinced. "Really? What else would you think?" You shrugged helplessly. Before dawn broke, after they had chatted for a little while, you urged Xiaodai to get some sleep. However, no sooner had the words left your mouth than shouts came from the study across the hall. "Chief, the second lady, is about to give birth too." Your heart skipped a beat, and you dashed over to Jian Ying's side like a gust of wind. The midwives, fresh from the battlefield, quickly took their positions, skillfully guiding Jian Ying on breathing and posture. With the recent experience, everyone was noticeably calmer this time. You stayed beside her, constantly offering encouragement and comfort. When Jian Ying heard that Sister Xiaodi had already safely delivered a son, and both mother and child were fine, she felt much more reassured, her confidence bolstered. This birth also went very smoothly. Perhaps the walking exercises you had insisted they both do had paid off, combined with their good diet, strong bodies, and the baby being in the correct position. The midwife was experienced, and you had already
educated them on the key point of don't hold back, shout hard. Sure enough, without much struggle, Jianying also successfully gave birth to a baby girl. Learning she had delivered a daughter, Jianying's spirits dipped slightly. You, however, were overjoyed. You had always wanted a daughter in your previous life but never had the chance. You quickly consoled her. A daughter is great. She'll definitely grow up to be as beautiful as you. They say daughters are like considerate little padded jackets to their parents. You just wait to enjoy the blessings a daughter brings. Seeing that you weren't the least bit disappointed and actually seemed quite happy, Jianying finally relaxed. Once things were settled on Jianying's side as well, the sky had fully brightened. You decided to carry her to the main bedroom too. It was cold, and having the two women go through their postpartum confinement separately would be too boring. Putting them together allowed them to chat and relieve the monotony. The two tiny babies, one boy and one girl, having just drunk the precious colostrum under the midwife's guidance, were now lying side by side in the middle of the large kang, sleeping like logs. Xiaodi and Jianying leaned together against the large wooden chest at the head of the kang, each holding a bowl of steaming hot poached eggs in brown sugar water, eating in small mouthfuls. "Husband, give the children names," Xiaodi said, looking up at you while eating her egg. Jianying beside her also cast an expectant gaze your way. "Absolutely. I thought of their names long ago. Just wait." You put down your bowl, dashed back to the study like the wind, picked up a brush and wrote down two names with swift strokes. Then you ran back and stuffed a slip of paper into each woman's hand. Xiaodai took hers and saw the two characters. Luo Cheng, which she recognized. She couldn't recognize the name on Jianying's slip. She knew the first character was your surname, Luo, but the curvy, complicated character after it was unfamiliar. She looked to Xiaodi for help. "Sister, do you recognize this character?" Xiaodi leaned over to look, then shook her head too. "Husband, what is Luo Cheng's sister called? Why haven't I seen this character before either?" "This character is pronounced Lan," you explained proudly. "It's the Lan from Billowing Waves, describing the grand majesty of water. Yinger and I were brought together by fate involving water. Lanner is the crystallization of that connection. From now on, my daughter will be called Luo Lan. Chenger. Lanner." Jianying's eyes sparkled upon hearing the explanation, her face full of happiness as she spoke softly to the two deeply sleeping babies. "Your daddy has given you names. Did you hear?" Unfortunately, the two little bundles, only a few hours old, showed them no courtesy whatsoever. Having eaten their fill, they simply slept. Hearing their mother's call, they merely grunted impatiently a couple of times, rolled over, and continued sleeping. After the two new mothers finished their eggs and fell asleep under your urging, you finally sat down at the table. While continuing to ponder that headache-inducing chemical plant blueprint, you occasionally glanced up at the large figure and two small ones sleeping soundly on the kang, a warm feeling spreading through your heart. Time passed like this until almost noon, when the timid call of a minor official sounded at the door. He didn't dare barge directly into your inner rooms and was stopped at the entrance by a vigilant woman. Hearing the commotion, you came out from the room. "Chief, a Flying Falcon dispatch just arrived. It's from General Yu Fu's side." "Oh? Let me see it." Hearing it was news from the front line, your spirits lifted. You immediately took the letter, which was contained in a bamboo tube, its lid sealed with wax and stamped with Yu Fu's exclusive seal. After checking that the seal was intact, you twisted open the lid and pulled out the paper inside. The letter wasn't long, just a routine report as you had requested. It basically said that after several days and nights of hard sailing, the fleet was very close to the destination. However, having drifted at sea for a long time, they were a bit unsure of the exact direction, so Yu Fu had first sent out a small reconnaissance boat to scout the way. Once the target location was confirmed, the fleet sailed forward a bit more and began landing on the coast, about 100 li away from the objective. The landing took place during the day. There was no one on the shore, but the area was desolate wilderness without even a simple dock. The large sailing ships had too deep a draft and couldn't get close to the shore. They had to rely on small landing craft to ferry people ashore batch by batch, a laborious back-and-forth process that took quite some time to get all 4,000-plus men onto land. Transporting the war horses was the most difficult part. The sunken-hold-type sand ships also couldn't approach the shore due to their draft. While there was some thin ice near the riverbank that hadn't completely melted, it couldn't possibly withstand the horses' hooves. The river water was bone-chillingly cold, making the horses wade through it. They'd likely freeze and collapse immediately. That was definitely not an option. In the end, it was the quick-witted Yu Fu who had an idea. He had the men line up the small landing craft in a row, secure them with ropes, and then lay wooden planks on top, managing to construct a simple pontoon bridge. Only then were the 1,000-plus treasured war horses safely brought ashore. Following. Your plan. The army rested on the shore for a day after landing to recover their strength and adapt to the land environment. Only on the second day did they begin to stealthily advance towards the destination. At that point, Yu Fu personally took the 3 old companions, the 2-masted sailing ships, and continued along the water route. They traveled faster by water, so they could depart later, perfectly coordinating their timing with the main force's overland march. The letter's content ended there. You knew well that letter delivery took time. By now Yu Fu and his men had likely already reached the shore, near the barbarian tribe, and started making trouble. Sure enough, not long after this letter was sent, the 3 2-masted sailing ships under Yu Fu's command appeared swaggeringly off the riverbank by the barbarian tribe's settlement. Although this area was south of the Han tribe's territory, winter was still harsh. The snow from the previous days hadn't completely melted, and while the temperature had risen slightly, it remained freezing. The grass hadn't started growing yet, and there was hardly any animal activity in the wild. The barbarian tribe's food supply was already running low. They could only tighten their belts, managing just 1 meal every 2 days, bitterly enduring and hoping for spring to arrive early so they could go hunting. Unfortunately, this beautiful wish of theirs was completely shattered by Yu Fu's arrival. The 3 2-masted sailing ships stopped arrogantly by the riverbank. They didn't lower their sails but merely adjusted the angle so the sails wouldn't catch the wind. Then, upon Yu Fu's command, the sailors on board swung their drumsticks and vigorously beat the large drums. Dong, 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 dong. The heavens shaking. Drum beats broke the silence, startling even some mice digging for food in the snow, sending them scurrying back into their holes with a swish. The barbarian tribe wasn't far from the riverbank and naturally heard the unusual noise. "What's that sound? Why does it sound so familiar?" asked a woman listlessly, warming herself by a fire inside a stone house, speaking to the man beside her. They hadn't eaten in a day and were ravenously hungry. Sounds like it's coming from the river." The man listened carefully, cocking his ear. "That sound, it's very rhythmic. Sounds man-made. It's likely those people who came last. Autumn in the strange boats, they had lots of good stuff. You wait here, I'll go take a look." As he spoke, the man grabbed 2 sharpened short spears from beside the door and tucked a stone axe into his belt, preparing to leave. "Hey, wait." The woman quickly stopped him, pulling out a small dark piece of jerky from her bosom. "Eat this. Before you go, you need strength." The man looked back at the precious piece of jerky, hesitated with a frown, but ultimately took it and stuffed it into his mouth in 2 or 3 bites, chewing quickly. Although it was life-saving rations that shouldn't be used casually, if eating it allowed him to snatch some good loot later, it would be worth it. Then they wouldn't have to starve anymore. After finishing the jerky, the man wiped his mouth, gripped his weapon tightly, and went out. Once outside, he saw, whoa, quite a few people from the tribe had come out with weapons, their expressions grave, all heading towards the riverbank as if by common consent. After walking a short distance, they indeed saw the 3 strange boats that had appeared last autumn. And this time, they were brazenly stopped right there, continuously beating drums, making huge noises as a provocation. What were these people trying to do? Commander Yu, the natives are out. They're coming out, heading towards us, reported the lookout high up on the mast at the top of his lungs. Hearing this, Yu Fu was amused. A cold smirk touched the corner of his mouth as he immediately issued orders to all 3 ships simultaneously. All ships, attention. Lower all landing craft. Send one over first to probe their strength. Shields up. This is a feint attack. Put on a convincing show. Don't actually get into a fight with them. Avoid unnecessary casualties. On the barbarian side, 200 or 300 men surged out, brandishing a motley collection of weapons. Stone axes, bone clubs, wooden spears, you name it. Their chief, Ju, even more imposing, held 2 precious steel knives looted during the last clash, running at the very front. Reaching the riverbank, they immediately saw the Han tribe's 3 ships slowly lowering small boats. Soldiers aboard, some holding shields and steel knives, others gripping gleaming long spears, gathered near the gunwales, yelling fiercely, glaring menacingly at the shore. Their posture screamed imminent all-out assault. Ju's heart sank. He knew this was bad. Last time, despite having the advantage of terrain and numbers, they were beaten soundly. Judging by the enemy's stance this time, they clearly meant business. What could they do? However, Ju was the chief after all. His mind worked quickly and he made an immediate decision. He yelled at the top of his lungs to his men. These people are definitely here for revenge. Last time we stole their things and killed their people. Their weapons are too powerful, we can't let them land. If they establish a foothold, we're finished. Everyone, hold the line. Most of the tribesmen heard this and thought it made sense, starting to prepare for defense as the chief instructed. But there were a few dimwits whose eyes were practically glued to the steel knives in Ju's hands, saliva nearly dripping. They craned their necks and shouted, "What's there to fear? Last time we weren't ready. This time we're prepared, so what if they land? Don't you want those fine clothes they're wearing? Don't you want those knives that cut iron like mud? If we don't, let them come down. How can we snatch their stuff? We don't have boats to chase them." Ju heard this and nearly exploded with anger. Someone actually dared to openly contradict him, inciting everyone to court death? He pointed furiously at the man's nose and cursed, "Bullshit. Last time we weren't ready, but they weren't ready either. And what happened? We had more people, and we suffered more deaths. If we let them crawl ashore again this time, we'll be completely wiped out. No matter how good the stuff is, you need to be alive to take it. Listen to me. Hurry up and find big rocks and long wooden poles. Break the ice along the riverbank. Use the long poles to push their boats back. We absolutely cannot let them reach the shore."
Say what you will. Though the barbarians coveted the Han tribe's goods, their lives were more important. Plus, Ju generally held high prestige. After thinking it over, everyone concluded the chief was right. Survival came first. Thus, while Fu's side leisurely lowered their landing craft, the barbarian tribe mobilized. Over 700 adult men split into 2 groups. Half stood guard on the bank with weapons, eyes glued to the river. The other half scrambled around, collecting rocks and long wooden poles. Under Ju's direction, some men huffed and puffed, hauling stones to smash the ice along the riverbank, attempting to create obstacles to hinder the Han landing or use broken ice to impede the small boats. Yu Fu watched everything clearly from his ship, laughing inwardly. Go ahead, make a fuss. The more commotion the better, as long as all your attention is fixed here. Before long, all 6 landing craft were in the water. Yu Fu first sent one over to test the waters. A dozen men huddled behind shields, protecting the front of the boat completely, while others rowed hard on both sides. As expected, the small boat had barely rowed to within about 50 meters of the shore when the barbarians on land started, showering it with rocks like hail. Fist-sized stones thudded against the shields. The Han tribe's first probing landing ended in failure. The boat immediately stopped rowing, drifted downstream with the current for a bit, escaping the range of the stones, and then slowly paddled back beside the large ship. A thunderous cheer erupted from the barbarians on shore, celebrating their repulse of the enemy's first attack. But their joy lasted only a few seconds before Yu Fu's second wave of harassment arrived. Same old tactic.
One boat made a show of approaching the shore. This time, however, Yu Fu played it smart. While the main barbarian force was focused on the first boat, busy hurling stones, he quietly dispatched a second boat, circling downstream about 500 meters away, feigning a forced landing attempt there. The barbarian chief Ju had sharp eyes and immediately spotted the maneuver. He quickly sent a portion of his men running downstream to intercept. But by the time they arrived, panting, the dozens of men from the second Han boat had already jumped onto the ice near the bank. Seeing the enemy split their forces, they promptly and nimbly leaped back onto their boat and rowed away. Simultaneously, the first boat heard the signal gong for retreat and withdrew calmly amidst the barbarians' enthusiastic farewell of flying stones. And so the two sides engaged in a back and forth across the riverbank, waging a war of words and a war of stones. The scene looked lively, but in reality not a single person was even injured. Ju directed his tribesmen to rush back and forth along the bank, defending everywhere, while constantly having to smash ice to create obstacles. Yu Fu's side, however, treated it like a game, using the advantage of their 6 landing craft to send men forward in rotations to harass the enemy, never giving them a chance to breathe. As for themselves, they ate and drank when they needed to. When one group got tired of acting, the next group took over. They were practically treating it as a large-scale live-action drill, having a grand time. While Yu Fu's feint east, attack I, west performance was in full swing, the main force that had landed earlier, led by Duoduo and Sui Tu, moved like a legion of ghosts, swiftly traversing the snow-covered landscape. Both commanders remembered your orders clearly, deploying scouts and mounted scouts far and wide. Small teams of 5 or 6 men operated every 3 or 4 li, forming a vast invisible protective screen around the main army. It was late winter, early spring, the lean season. Many small surrounding tribes were suffering from famine, their food stores from the previous autumn nearly depleted. Left with no choice, they had to brave the icy conditions to forage for food, digging out squirrel nests, excavating roots, or forming small hunting parties to try their luck. What they never dreamed of was that this foraging trip would not only yield no food, but bring catastrophic misfortune upon them. According to your plan, this military movement was top secret. The army had to circle around to the enemy's rear completely undetected. Therefore, any living creature encountered along the way, regardless of who it was to be captured first. Not a single whisper could be allowed to leak out. Consequently, the tribesmen from nearby small groups out searching for food met with terrible luck. Often, while bent over, digging in the snow, a group of strangely dressed individuals would suddenly appear. Thick red cotton jackets covered by black hardened leather armor, carrying gleaming unfamiliar weapons. Without a word, these people would knock them down and swiftly tie them up securely. Their movements were incredibly practiced, their coordination seamless. Some drew attention, others attacked from behind, and still others specialized in tying captives. The entire process flowed like water. These red-clothed strangers were also incredibly quiet during their operations. They never asked who you were or stated their intentions. After tying someone up, the scout team would leave one person behind to guard, send another back with a message, and the rest would continue scouting ahead. The bound captives were terrified out of their wits, struggling desperately. In these times of scarcity, who knew if these suddenly appearing figures were the legendary cannibals? What if they were dragged off to be boiled and eaten later? The thought bred increasing fear. One young scout was guarding 5 recently captured savages, including a young woman. All 5 had their mouths gagged with hemp ropes, able to emit only muffled sounds. The scout pulled a small, handy entrenching tool from his belt, brushed the snow off a fallen log, and sat down. Then he took out a palm-sized flatbread from his tunic, sliced it open with his dagger, carefully tucked in 2 slices of oily, cured sausage, opened his mouth wide, and began chewing with loud crunch sounds. Reconnaissance soldiers expended a lot of energy, so their food rations were naturally better than the main forces. They had enough dry food. The scout ate with gusto, the smacking of his lips exceptionally clear in the quiet woods. The 5 bound captives beside him watched the bread in his hand, saliva practically drooling. The scout hesitated for a moment, then offered the remaining half of his bread forward. "You want some?" The men didn't react, but the young woman, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. She was truly starving. Her tribe had run out of food long ago. Women were always last in line for food distribution, which was why she had been forced to come out with the men to search for sustenance. Even if they found something, it likely wouldn't have been her turn. Seeing her nod, the scout went behind her and untied the rope around her mouth, though her hands and feet remained bound. He held the bread himself and offered it to the girl's mouth. The girl didn't stand on ceremony, immediately opening her mouth to bite. The cooled flatbread was very chewy and filling. The sausage tucked inside was salty and fragrant, with a hint of smoky spice. Eaten with the bread, it was simply heavenly. This flavor could quickly replenish strength and salt. The girl wolfed down several bites, almost choking. She had never eaten anything so delicious in her life. She truly couldn't understand where these people came from, or why they had captured them. However, being able to eat such fragrant bread seemed worth it, even if she died right after. Eat slowly, no one's going to fight you for it. Seeing her choke, the scout quickly took out his bamboo water canteen and gave her a few sips. "That's all that's left. This is my own ration. I really can't give you any more." After the girl finished the half-bread, she became much more compliant. Though her mouth wasn't bound, she remained quiet and stopped struggling. The scout took out the other half of the bread from his tunic, munching on it himself while rambling. "When I was little, I was about like you now. Our tribe was poor too. Come winter, there was no food, and it got toughest just before spring. Many people didn't make it. But things are better now." A trace of pride appeared on his face. "Since joining the Han tribe, we build our own warm houses with heated kangs, grow our own crops for grain, raise our own livestock for meat. We've never gone hungry again. I even married a wife in the tribe from another clan too. Our kid is already 2 years old." At this point, his voice lowered and he sighed. It's a pity, though. Many people from my old tribe never got to live such good days. They were, like you, eventually starved to death. If only they could have been as lucky as you back then. Tasted such delicious flatbread, maybe. Maybe they wouldn't have died." The scout seemed to have stirred up sad memories, his mood dampening. After a moment, he spoke to the captives. "Don't worry, we're not bad people. We have something very important to do right now, and can't let anyone know. That's why we captured you. Once we're finished, we'll let you go." Regardless of whether they understood, he finished speaking to himself, stood up, stretched his limbs, then gathered some clean snow, stuffing it into his canteen to slowly melt into water. After waiting for about a quarter of an hour, a loud, chaotic noise suddenly erupted from deep within the woods. The sound wasn't extremely loud, but very dense, like thousands upon thousands of feet tramping on snow, somewhat resembling a large herd of animals migrating in winter, but without the accompanying roars of beasts. Before long, the sound grew, closer, interspersed with the scrape of armor. The scout's spirits lifted. He knew the main force had arrived. He quickly stood by the side of the path, ready to greet them and provide directions. Sure enough, the next second, the eyes of the bound barbarians went wide. From the distant forest, the shadowy forms of a massive procession emerged. Not an animal herd, but composed of humans. Yet this sight filled them with even greater terror than a herd. The people in this army seemed cast from the same mold. All wore identical thick cotton clothing, covered by the same black leather armor, carried the same standardized weapons, marched in neat formations, and advanced in utter silence. At the very front of the column rode a man on a tall horse, clad in a striking red cloak. Seeing the scout and the captives by the roadside, he urged his horse forward a few steps. The scout immediately straightened up and reported loudly, "Reporting to the commander. Several more foragers from nearby tribes have been captured ahead, requesting directions for advance." Duoduo reined in his horse and nodded. Noted. Continue scouting ahead. You're not needed here. The scout hesitated, then couldn't resist pleading for the captives. Commander, sir, these people, they don't look like bad people, nor are they our target. They just came out because they were starving. Our army rations are sufficient, do you think? We could give them something to eat, even just some thin congee. Perhaps it could win their hearts, and later we could incorporate their tribe. The chief would surely be pleased. Duoduo frowned, glanced at the scout, but didn't outright refuse. The army had just set out, and they indeed weren't short on food, but he couldn't just distribute kindness haphazardly. They were here to fight a war, not run a charity. What you said I will consider, Duoduo stated gravely. But matters here are not your concern. We are an army. Everything prioritizes the military mission. Mission first, everything else comes second. Only by winning the battle first will the chief be happy. Otherwise, even if you bring back more people, if we lose the fight, the chief will still be angry. All right, that's settled. Quickly rejoin your unit. Continue scouting ahead. Don't delay the army's march. Yes, sir. The scout didn't dare say more, responding with a clear affirmation. With a helpless sigh, he turned and hurried off to catch up with his comrades. Marching through snow was inherently difficult. Coupled with unfamiliar terrain requiring scouts to probe ahead, the main army's pace was inevitably slow. However, the commanders were keenly aware that Yu Fu's operation on the river relied purely on acting, and the sailors must be exhausted, liable to blow their cover at any moment. So unspoken, everyone tacitly quickened their pace. This was the Han tribe's first large-scale joint operation involving regular military corps. No one wanted to be the weak link, everyone burning with the desire to fight a brilliant battle. 3. Scout teams ahead, casting their net wide, continued capturing people. What Duoduo, Shui Tu, and the others hadn't expected was capturing several hundred individuals on the very first day. Men, women, old and young, from various tribes scattered across the region. This presented the generals with a dilemma: what to do with so many people. Killing them outright was not an option. They were a benevolent force, mostly because the chief forbade it. But keeping them tied up required diverting significant manpower for guarding and feeding, making them a drag. Releasing them? Even more impossible. Letting them go now would be tantamount to announcing to the world, the Han tribe army is here for a sneak attack. They had to wait until after the battle, ensuring no leaks before considering release. The generals huddled together and made a decision: detach over 100 personnel from the logistics units of the 2 Weisuo garrisons to specifically guard these captives. The captives would remain tied, no loosening allowed, to prevent trouble. Simultaneously, Sui Dongliang and Ying Rui assigned these logistics soldiers a special mission. You won't be fighting. Your job is to watch these people, give them food, and if you can chat them up, convince them to join our Han tribe. I'll personally request commendations for you from the chief upon return. Hearing this, the logistics soldiers' eyes lit up. This was a windfall. Logistics personnel rarely got chances for meritorious service. Now they could earn merits just by talking, without risking their lives on the front lines. Only a fool would refuse. Thus, these logistics soldiers immediately sprang into action. They grouped the captured prisoners by tribe for centralized guarding. Most remained bound, but 1 or 2 seemingly cleverer individuals or those of higher status from each tribe were untied. They were tasked with feeding their companions and acting as interpreters, explaining the purpose of the Han tribe's operation. We're not here to attack you. We're going after that clueless barbarian tribe to the south. Capturing you was purely a precaution against information leaks. We guarantee we'll let you go home after the battle. Hearing this, the captives felt much more relieved. Initially furious about being captured, learning they wouldn't be killed, would be fed, and weren't the target themselves, their resentment dissipated significantly. Many even felt a bit of schadenfreude. Serves you right. Payback for the barbarian tribe bullying us last time. But after the relief, a new problem arose. Some captives grew anxious not for themselves, but for their tribesmen back home waiting for food. Anyone desperate enough to venture out in this weather meant their tribe was already starving. If they didn't return for several days, the old, weak women and children at home might genuinely starve to death. This couldn't happen. Just then, the strategist among the logistics soldiers, an old veteran nicknamed Fake Blind Man, stepped forward. He approached several captives who looked like leaders of small tribes, and using clumsy sign language while spitting energetically, began his grand recruitment plan. "Hey, listen up. We Han tribe have plenty of food. Want to live? Want your tribespeople to eat their fill? Then join our Han tribe. We have God-taught farming methods, techniques for raising livestock. Come with us. As long as you're not lazy, willing to work, I guarantee meals every day, easily supporting your whole family. Now, tell your people what I said. Whoever is willing to join, I'll give him food right now and let him go back alone to spread the word. We'll send 2 men with him. Let me be clear. If you dare try any tricks to deceive us when our army returns, we'll slaughter your entire tribe. Choose wisely." Fake Blind Man's mix of carrot and stick immediately caused an uproar among the captives. They broke into excited chatter, discussing amongst themselves, eyes filled with hesitation, fear, and a flicker of longing. After a while, one group finally made a decision. A young-looking man, though skeletally thin, stepped forward and asked in hesitant common tongue, Is what you say true? Join you? Really get food?" "Of course." Fake Blindman slapped his chest, gesturing even more vigorously. "We Han tribe are so powerful, would we lie to you? You saw our army. That's just a small part of our tribe's strength. If we didn't have grain, could we support so many full-time soldiers?" The young man nodded. He had indeed seen the army passing like a steel torrent earlier, a might he had never witnessed before. As this man said, their soldiers alone outnumbered his entire tribe. The reason this young man decided so quickly was because he himself was the chief of this small tribe. His tribe numbered less than 100 people. The grain stored in autumn had long run out, forcing him to lead his men out to try their luck. He hadn't expected to run into the Han army, truly collateral damage from a distant fire. Being captured for a few days didn't matter much to him, but his tribespeople couldn't wait. Without food soon, people would actually starve. The Han tribe before him was indeed terrifyingly powerful. Joining them meant he'd certainly lose his position as chief, but compared to the survival of the entire tribe, what was the title worth? However, just to be sure, he pressed further. "You just said, as long as we're willing to work, there's food. If we go, what will we need to do?" "What you'll do isn't my decision. Someone will arrange it." Fake Blind Man waved his hand. "But you'll definitely have to build your own houses, learn farming, raise livestock. Don't worry, people will teach you." He held up the half-eaten flatbread temptingly. "See this bread? As long as you're willing to put in the effort, I guarantee, once you're with us, you can eat this every day." Gazing at the golden flatbread, smelling the aroma of the sausage, the young man swallowed hard and finally made up his mind. "Okay, I agree. Our tribe joins you. Now, can you let us go?" "No," Fake Blindman immediately shook his head. "Among you few, only you can leave, and I must send 2 men with you. Don't think about playing tricks or harming our men. If those don't return, your companions here will all pay with their lives." The young chief hesitated, then finally nodded. He looked back at his bound tribesmen, then turned with determination towards the direction of his own tribe. Fake Blind Man immediately picked 2 sharp logistics soldiers to follow him. The young chief's tribe wasn't far. After all, foraging. In winter, one couldn't travel too far. In less than an hour, the 3 returned with the entire tribe. A group of sallow, emaciated, raggedly dressed men and women, shivering and holding equally thin children, trudged through the snow. When they heard their chief say he was taking them to join a powerful tribe where there was food and shelter, they agreed almost unanimously without hesitation. Late winter was too harsh. They were sick of the hardship of eating only once every few days. As long as they could survive, eat their fill, What did it matter which tribe they joined? Seeing their cooperation, fake blindman immediately had the captured tribesmen untied. He also called over other logistics soldiers to bring out their limited, spare bedding and wrap it around these shivering new members. Many didn't even have decent animal skins, and their hands and feet were frozen stiff from the journey. Next, fake blindman directed several soldiers to dig a simple smokeless stove. In the ground, set up a large army pot and shovel clean snow into it to boil water. Once the snow melted, they added rice and chopped smoked sausage, soon simmering a fragrant pot of meat congee. The steaming hot congee was distributed to each newly joined tribesman. These long-starved savages didn't care about the heat, grabbing the bowls and wolfing down the food, licking the bowls clean afterwards. Fake blind man, worried about upsetting their stomachs, didn't give them too much, just enough to line their bellies for now. The scene of distributing steaming congee was the best advertisement. Those captive tribes still hesitating and observing couldn't sit still any longer. They had witnessed the Han tribe's power firsthand. Now they saw their food firsthand too. What was there to hesitate about? Facing death, what use was clinging to a pitiful sense of tribal belonging? Consequently, more and more people expressed willingness to join the Han tribe, volunteering to go back and contact their kinsmen. Fake blind man stuck to his rule. 1 person released per tribe, 2 guards accompanying them. Running out of manpower? No problem. He directly requisitioned the young chief and the able-bodied men from his tribe to help guard the remaining captives. Soon, those who went back to make contact returned one after another. Some small tribes migrated entirely, throwing their lot in completely. Some larger tribes sent messengers who lacked authority, so they brought back tribal elders or chiefs for fake blind man to personally negotiate with. Some were even more ruthless, worried their chief wouldn't agree. They went back, killed the chief, and then led their people to join. Others were quick-witted, deceiving their chief by claiming to have found abundant food requiring help to transport, then tricking all their relatives and friends out to secretly join the Han tribe. Fake blindmen accepted all who came willingly. As soon as people arrived, pots were set up for congee. Food supply, no worries. The logistics soldiers didn't carry much, but the large ships behind had plenty. If it really ran low, cargo ships could always return to the tribe for more. Fake blind man knew clearly that as long as he could increase the Han tribe's population, the chief would absolutely not be stingy with a little grain. The logistics soldiers' efforts were not in vain. This series of operations yielded significant results. 3 small tribes of less than 100 people each chose to join entirely. Numerous scattered families also came, bringing dependents. Adding those who defected with parts of their tribes, the total newly recruited population reached 600 or 700 people. By that evening, the newcomers seeking refuge plus the remaining captives totaled over 1,000. However, 300 or 400 diehards or those still undecided remained bound. Managing so many people with just over 100 logistic soldiers was indeed becoming strenuous. Therefore, fake blind man quickly dispatched riders to catch up with the main army, report the situation, and request that the willing newcomers be transported to the rear by ship first. 1 tower ship could hold 700 people, perfectly accommodating these new members. The news quickly reached Duoduo, Shui Tu, and the other generals. They were quite surprised. They hadn't expected the logistics soldiers to be so resourceful, managing to incidentally recruit so many people. However, increasing the population was always good, aligning with the chief's consistent instructions. After discussion, they immediately approved fake blindman's plan. A messenger was sent back, ordering one of the tower ships left behind to depart immediately, specifically tasked with transporting these newcomers back to the Han tribe for settlement. Simultaneously, all remaining ships, including the large troop transports and the remaining 2-masted sailing ships, were ordered to proceed at full speed towards the target waters, preparing to participate in the final encirclement. After a day and a half of forced march, the main army was already very close to the barbarian tribe's outer perimeter. Notifying the fleet to close in now would ensure that during the final encirclement, both land and water forces appeared simultaneously, completely sealing the enemy's escape routes. The new members who chose to join the Han tribe were sent in batches to the large ships by the riverbank under the fading light of dusk. It was freezing cold, and they lacked clothing and food. The logistics troops had limited tents and blankets. Leaving them outdoors overnight would surely result in many freezing to death by morning. Although the ship cabins were also cold, they at least offered shelter from wind and rain, serving as a temporary refuge. The young chief felt both anticipation and apprehension. He didn't know if his decision today was right or wrong, but when he stood on the riverbank and personally saw the row of massive ships like small mountains moored on the wide river, all his doubts vanished. The immense hulls and towering masts cast huge shadows in the sunset, delivering an unparalleled visual impact and mental shock. This was true power. These were all built by the Han tribe? The young chief's voice trembled as he pointed at the huge ships, asking the logistics squad leader guiding them. That's right. The squad leader's face beamed with shared pride. These were all built by our Han tribe. We sailed here from very, very far upstream on these ships. In a bit, listen to the arrangements. We'll send one large ship to take you back to the tribe. Once there, you'll have to rely on your own hard work to feed yourselves. This statement elicited another wave of gasps from the crowd. Regardless of whether the ships were useful, just being able to build something so enormous was proof enough of the Han tribe's strength. Still, some found it hard to believe. Just this one ship can fit all of us. So many people? Of course. The squad leader waved his hand somewhat impatiently. You're far away now, so it looks small. Once you get on board, you'll know just how big it really is. Saying this, he began signaling the sailors remaining on the ship. Soon, 3 landing craft came over to pick up people. Organized into groups of 100, the new members were ferried onto the tower ship's deck batch by batch, and then guided into the spacious cabins. When the last person stepped onto the deck, the enormous tower ship immediately weighed anchor, adjusted its sails, slowly turned around and headed back the way it came, upstream on the Liuyang River towards the territory of the Han tribe. The remaining dozens of large and small sailing ships, having received their orders, also hoisted their sails and set off under the cover of night, converging towards the main battle waters to the south. At this point, the Han tribe's land and water encirclement of the barbarian tribe had begun to take shape. Everything was ready. All that was needed was the final push. As long as the upcoming pincer movement proceeded smoothly, this cross-season, cross-region, expeditionary mission would be considered a complete success.